Hey guys, today we're going to be doing a more advanced Fusion 360 tutorial. If you haven't seen our video on the basics, check the description down below. And if you'd like to see more Fusion 360 tutorials, please consider subscribing. Let's get into the video. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making this table with cross bracing on it. It's similar to tables that we have in pictures on our Instagram and on our build ideas tab on our website. It's super strong, it's super durable, so I'm going to show you how we can design this in CAD and then get numbers straight from our CAD model. So in order to get started, we're going to be using this IKEA table that we've selected. It's just any sort of table. This one's just really basic and cheap. So in order to get started on CAD, what we're going to do is we're just going to check our document settings and make sure our units are in inches, because that's probably the easiest thing to go from here. If you are somewhere else and want to use millimeters or centimeters or something, you can come in here and change your default units for the document, but you can always use other dimensions. It's just this is the one that's going to be easiest to work with. So to get started, we're going to draw the top of the table. And in order to do that, we're going to do a create new sketch and then select this top plane. And then we're going to click R to create a rectangle, which is also up here. And then we're going to select center rectangle over on the right side of the screen. And then we're going to select the origin point so that we have a good reference on our model. So then just kind of drag it out one way. And then we're going to click D to dimension up here also. Select the shorter side. And then the length of that is 23 and 5/8. So we're going to type in 23 plus parentheses 5 divided by 8, and then make sure that we close that parentheses and it'll turn black to show that it's ready and it's ready to do the math. And then when we click enter, that's going to kind of scale up our whole drawing. And then we're just going to leave it on dimension and select the longer side. And this wants to be 47 1/4, but we can do that math in our head, so 47.25, and then click enter. And now our whole rectangle is black, which means it's fully dimensioned. So then we're going to do finish sketch, and then kind of zoom around. We're going to click E to extrude this into an actual three-dimensional tabletop, also up here. It's selecting this profile because that's the only profile that we have in the document. And then pull this up a little bit. And then the thickness of the table is 1 3/8, so 1 plus parentheses 3 divided by 8. Close the parentheses and then click enter. And now this is our tabletop. I'm going to come over here and label that as tabletop. And that's just kind of station keeping. That's going to help us later. And then what we want to do, it's the same as our last video, so if you haven't seen it, it's going to help a lot. It's going to go a lot more into depth. I'm just going to do it really fast in this video. So what we're going to do now is create the legs coming off of our tabletop. In order to do that, we're going to create a new sketch right here on this bottom surface. And I'm going to just create the cross section of the conduit where it's going to interface with our model. So in order to do that, we're going to click C to create a circle, also up here. And then click here, and then we know that the outside diameter of our conduit is 0.922 inches. And click enter, wait for that to load. And then from here, I'm gonna space it off of the corners right now, which we'll have to redo later, but this will just help us keep our bearings. So we're gonna click D to dimension, click the center point here, and then select the edge reference. And then we're gonna use the same dimensions as the last video, so 1.5 inches, then click enter, and then select the center and here. And that's going to be the same, 1.5. And then I'm just going to pull this outer diameter out. And then from here, we just have to create the thickness of the conduit, so we don't have a rod, we'll have a tube coming out. And I'm going to click this outside circumference, and then click O to offset, which is also up here in modify tools. And then drag this on the inside. It'll show that we're going to be using negative distance. So I'm going to do negative 0.4047, which is the nominal thickness of 3/4 inch conduit. So from here we have our cross section. We have it located, everything's black, which means it's fully dimensioned. So we're going to click finish sketch here. And then from here, what we're going to do is pull that cross section away. So we're gonna do another extrude command, clicking this ring surface, this ring profile, and then pull this down a little bit. And then what we want is we want our whole table top surface, the top surface, to be 30 inches off the bottom. So we're gonna do 30, and then we're gonna do minus, and then we're gonna type in the thickness of our tabletop. So we're gonna do -1, and then that's 1 plus 3/8. So we're gonna do 1 plus parentheses 3 divided by 8, and then close both parentheses. And then when we click enter, that's gonna pull that down to the right length. And just to check that, I'm gonna click this bottom surface, zoom out a little bit, and then control click the top surface. And then that's showing that our minimum distance is 30 inches, which is what we want. And then just to confirm everything, back here on our bodies, it's still only counting everything as one body. That's because in our extrude, we left it as a join. So to change that, we just double click down here, or what you can do is right click it and edit feature. Then that pulls us back in, and we're gonna change our operation from a join to new body. Click OK on that. And now we have our tabletop and our leg. I'm gonna change the leg to leg, the name to leg. So then from here, what we wanna do is put a 90-degree connector up on this top bit. So in order to pull that in, I'm gonna come over into our 90-degree connector file, click on it, Control C. Then come back in here, create base feature. This is the same process we used in the last video. And then Control V once we're in that base feature. And then from here, I'm just gonna pull it on its side so it's kind of pointing the right way. And then look from above and just rotate it until it's pointing the right way this way. So I'm gonna type in 180. And then what I wanna do is I just wanna move it around that area for us. And to do that, I'm just gonna grab this. This lets us pull it in 2 planes at once, 2 axes at once. And then once it's kind of in that area, I'm gonna click OK. From here, finish base feature. Now it's gonna pull us back in here. All of our bodies are named. And then from what we wanna do here is, because we're using a more advanced design technique, we're gonna change everything from bodies to components. And what components lets us do is it lets us use joint commands, which is the main reason we're changing it here. And it kind of just cleans everything up and allows you to change things a lot easier. So to do that, I want to click this new component tab. That's gonna pull us in here, and we can either make an empty component or from bodies. In this case, we wanna do from bodies because we have everything. And then I'm just gonna select everything. And this is gonna turn each one of these bodies into a new component. So I'm gonna click OK. And now you notice we have no bodies tab over here. We just have 3 components. And then from here, I want to join the top surface of this 90-degree connector to the top surface of this piece of conduit. And in order to do that, we're gonna create a joint. And in this case, we're gonna use a rigid joint. And I'll explain that in the later part of this video. So I'm gonna click joint. And then the way that I select things is component 1 is the part that's moving or rotating or sliding. And then component 2 is the more like rigid part of our feature. In this case, it doesn't really matter, but it's good practice to keep it the same. So in this, it's kind of the same as point-to-point command in the move command, except it shows this little node that we can select and which angle it's pointing at. So I'm gonna select this outer ring here, and then control, and then I can select any point of it. And then I'm gonna select the center point for us. I'm still holding control. And then click on that. That'll gray out the component that we've already selected, so it's a little easier to select other things. And then it automatically moved us to component 2. So I'm gonna control click that, or control over this outer ring, and then select the center of that. And now that's gonna move our component over there. We're using a rigid command, which it's already showing by this little block feature. So I'm gonna click OK. It's gonna load. And now from here, what this kind of shows us is that we can, if we wanted to move this leg, I'm just clicking the leg over here and M to move, or you can click this button up here. And then if I just want to move the leg, it also moves our connector with it. which is exactly what we want to be able to do. But we're not doing that yet. So then from here, I'm gonna create the crosses that come off of that. So this is similar to the last video. I'm gonna select this inner plane of our connector, create a sketch, and then click C to create a circle on this, and then make sure that snaps to the center point. Pull that out, 0.922 inches for the outside diameter, and then O to offset. Click on that outside diameter and then pull it on the inside, -0.047, enter. And then we're gonna finish that sketch and then click E to extrude that. Select all of our profiles and then kind of zoom out. And what we wanna do is extrude it to the origin plane. So in order to do that, we're gonna change this extend from distance to object. And then we wanna select this plane as our object. So that pulls it, and no matter how far off this was from the origin, it's always gonna pull it back towards the... You notice it's trying to do a join operation this time. We're gonna change that to a new component, not a new body, because we're playing with components in this tutorial. So from here, click OK. And now we have a new component 8 to use. And I'm just gonna change that from component 8 to long. You know, this is gonna be the longer beam. Then we're gonna do the same thing with this other side. So select this plane, create sketch, C to create a circle, or this tool up here. Make sure that it snaps to the center, pull it out, 0.922, enter, O to offset, select this outer side, pull it on the inside, -0.047, enter. Now we have that cross section, we're gonna leave that sketch, E to extrude, select all of our planes, all of our profiles, and then, oh, I accidentally clicked something, so it's trying to extend it to that distance. We're gonna pull it back on this side, but change extend to distance to object, and select this plane. That's showing that it's gonna pull it out this far, which is fine. And then we want to do new component, and then click OK. So from here, I'm gonna change this component to short. Do that. And then what we need to do is we need to constrain the centers of these components to the maker pipe connector. So to do that, I'm actually gonna hide the maker pipe connector to start, and then create a joint. And then I'm gonna select this long pipe, select the center of that the same way, Control on the outside, click on the inside, and then bring this back in. And since it's kind of grayed out, it's a lot easier to select the center. So I'm gonna select the center of that. It's already on rigid, so that'll stay. Then click OK on that one. I'm gonna do the same on this other one. Joint, select the center of this, open up the connector again, and then zoom in to select that center point. It's already on rigid, which is great. Click OK. And then from here, we're going to create a new component to put all of these parts into it, and then we're gonna mirror all of those so that we'll have one component that has everything in it. So in order to do that, we're gonna do new component, and then we're just gonna create a new one that's top, then click OK. And then from here, we're going to add all of our top pieces into it. And to do that, we're just gonna control click them all over here and drag them in. And then we're gonna activate our whole document after that. So now we can close just the top bit separately. And that's just gonna make it a little easier to go forward. So from here, we're just gonna do the same mirror, and then we're gonna make sure that our pattern type is components. And then we're gonna select this top bit and our leg, because our leg is a completely separate component. And then we're just gonna select a mirror plane. I'm gonna select this one first, click OK. And then from here, I want to join these two pieces, so I'm gonna do a combine command. Our target body will be here and our tool body will be here. Make sure that those join, and then I'm gonna click OK. So our top mirror, and then I'm just gonna pull all of these into our top component, and then I should be able to delete that. So now our top is that whole range up here, and then we can can go back in. All right guys, now what we wanna do is we just wanna flip this whole component over. So we're gonna do another mirror command, components, and we're gonna select this top part, and then we're also gonna select both of these legs. Then we're gonna choose our mirror plane. This time we wanna select this mirror plane so that everything goes across that way. Check everything, everything looks good. Click OK on that. And then what we want to do is grab all of our, we have a new top. We want to move all of this stuff, all of the fun stuff into our other top. Then we're gonna just hold that, hide that for a second. Then we want to do a combine, so we're gonna combine this part and join those. Then we wanna combine this part and join those. So now we have 4 shafts going across, 4 beams going across, and that's exactly what we want for our top. We can hide that whole thing all at once, which is great. So in order to make this top kind of rigid and stay in place, I'm gonna go through and do joints on everything for us. So to start with that, I'm gonna hide our tabletop. That'll make it a little easier. And then I'm just gonna do the same process we did for these constraints or these joints and do it on all of the other ones. Clicking OK on that one. And now I'm gonna do the legs again on this. So I'm just gonna create a constraint here and here. Make sure that's rigid. And go through all of these. Do the same. Alrighty, and as we finish up with that, what we want to do is just make sure that nothing can move once we're done. So in order to check on that, we're going to just grab one of these legs and click move, and then everything should move with it in every direction that we choose. So even if we move up and down, everything is one solid piece. So then we can just check on all those. It has joints, it looks pretty good. And then we can add the tabletop back. And what I want to do is, because our legs aren't going to hold the tabletop in place, so I'm just going to go back, and this is kind of a retroactive part. I'm going to add a joint from the tabletop to the one of the legs. In order to do that, I'm going to do joint and then select the tabletop, but just make sure that the orientation is the same. So make sure you're not selecting the wrong plane. It's choosing this plane, and then I'm going to control click to this point. So now that's selected, and then I'm gonna select the pipe, or I'm gonna select the maker pipe connector, just because that's what we're actually joining. So I'm gonna control, click in the center there, and it's gonna move over, but what we know is that it's offset by 1.5 inches on each side. So in order to do that, I'm gonna just use these and drag this over, so 1.5. And then move this over and negative 1.5, because it's just deciding for that to be negative. And then once I click OK on that, now if we move one of the legs, everything will move all together. So there's no way to separate any of these pieces permanently unless we go back and delete all of our joints. So from here, what we want to do is make another rung of this top frame. So in order to do that, we just have to click on this top and then Control C, Control V, and then move it down. And once we do that, and I'm just gonna kind of click around here, and that's close enough. But now what we wanna do is create an actual joint on this one so that we know exactly where it will be. So in order to do that, I'm just gonna create a joint, and I'm gonna select this part, and I'm gonna decide to reference this off of the base plane, off of the ground, and choose how high off the ground it is. So using the same feature that we used on the tabletop, I'm gonna click down here. Everything should eventually move down this way once we're out of this mode. You can see the constraints are still there, but once we go into the joint mode, it kind of separates everything. So we're gonna do this, and then I'm gonna just kind of move it up until it's about right. And that looks like about 3 inches off of the ground. So I'm just gonna do, not -0.3, I'm gonna do -3. And then once I click enter, everything will snap back down to that point. So now we have a top rung and a bottom rung. I'm gonna click on this to hide some joints, and then we can go back into here. And it just kind of told it this is top 2. So to change that, I'm just gonna change this to bottom. Oh, that changes it to, so back in here, it changed it from top, and here is also top. So I'm just gonna change this from frame to frame, and then that'll be frame 1 and frame 2, and those are our top and bottom frames, which is fine. So I'm gonna go, and since we used components, everything's linked together. So if we wanted to change something here, it's automatically gonna go back and change it on the other one. That's kind of the advantage and disadvantage to components. So from here, I'm just gonna close the tabletop for now to make it a little easier. And I'm just gonna hide all of these joints over here. And I just have to do that on one of these. So I'm gonna open up frame 1 and hide the joints. And then that's just gonna hide all of them so it doesn't get in our way and it's not too confusing. From that, I'm going to work on the cross beams. So this is where it gets a little more complex, and this is actually the reason we decided to use components in this tutorial, is to make our cross beams and have it calculate the length of each cross member. So from this, looking back at our other piece, it's a T-connector that's just swiveled a little bit on its axis, on its rotation axis, and then a piece of conduit between it, and then it ends up over here. You can do all of the math for this yourself, but using it, since we're already using CAD, it's a lot easier to just have CAD do all of the math for us. So moving back in here, I'm going to pull in a T-connector. So to do that, that's the same situation. I'm gonna open up a T-connector, and then I'm gonna pull it in as a body and then change it later so that I have a little bit more control. So I'm gonna Control C, move back into here, create a base feature, Control V to put it in, and then I'm just gonna rotate it this way -90 degrees so it's a little easier to put in, and then I'm gonna move it somewhat close to this bar because this is where we're gonna put it off of. So I'm gonna click OK, and then finish that base feature. From here, I'm gonna change it into a component, make a joint to put this surface on the center of this beam, of this pipe. And then I'm gonna do the same over here with another connector. And then I'm gonna build a bar off of this one that we'll eventually use to snap it to the right angle. So we don't have to type in any angle or length here. It's just gonna automatically do it all for us. So to do that, I'm going to come back in here, click on it, new component from bodies that's already selected, click OK. And now our T-connector is already a component, which is great. And then I'm going to just create a joint, and I'm gonna put this point here, and then selecting the midpoint of this pipe, so I can just kind of mouse over this pipe, Control, and then we can see that our node snaps. I'm gonna make sure it snapped to the center. And then that goes here, making sure that we selected the T-connector originally. So now we do not want a rigid command, we want a revolution command so that it's allowed to slip and slide. Or we don't want it to slip, we want it to be able to rotate. So I'm gonna make a revolute, and then we can see that it's allowed to spin around on this, and we're just gonna click OK. So from here, now we want to do the same and put one down here. So I'm gonna do the same thing, I'm gonna create a new base feature. Control V to put it in, rotate it just this way, and then I'm gonna drag it using this plane over here somewhat, then click OK, finish our base feature, change this into a new component, because we have to use 2 components or else they'll try and do the same thing. And then click on this, joint, I'm gonna select the T connector first, and then make sure that I select the center point of this pipe. And it should already be on a revolute command because that's what it used last. So then I'm gonna click OK. So now from here we have 2 T connectors coming off from the middle. So now we're just gonna have it offset a little bit from the center line so that we'll be able to mirror a new one, and then it'll be able to line up perfectly in that spot. So from here, I'm gonna label these top T or top T and bottom T so that they're a little easier to look at. Oh, I keep changing the name wrong. So top T and bottom T, and then from the top, it doesn't really matter which one, I'm gonna create a beam or a pipe coming out of it that is longer than this distance from this pipe to this pipe. So in order to check that, I'm just gonna look at from this, and I'm gonna click on that, and then control click this, and that shows us our min distance is 50 inches. So I'm just gonna create a pipe coming out of it that's 60 inches long so that we know we're overshooting it a little bit. So to do that, just click here, new sketch, C, oh, and we can hide this top frame for a second. Frame 1 is our top. So I'm gonna click C to create a circle, make sure I select the center point, drag it out 0.922 inches, and then O to offset, click on this, pull this in, negative 0.047, click enter on that. Now we have our pipe profile, and then finish that. I'm gonna click E to extrude, and I'm just gonna pull it out 60 inches, not let it join, and I'm gonna make sure that it creates a new component for us. We're gonna kind of look over here just to make sure that it looks like it'll swivel the right amount, which it does, and then click OK. And just because we create a new component, it's not already constrained. So what we want to do on this one at least is make a joint from this pipe to the center point here. And we want that to be a rigid. So just come back in here and make sure that we're using a rigid motion, which means no motion at all. Click OK. And then for this next move, I'm just gonna ground our tabletop, which means that it's gonna ground it relative to everything else. In any document, you only wanna ground one thing and then kind of constrain everything off of that part. I'm just gonna ground the tabletop because that seems like the easiest thing to do. So in order to do that, I'm going to click on the tabletop, right click it, and then click ground. And then that'll put a little pin on it, which means the last thing it's gonna do to solve anything is move this tabletop, rotate it, do anything with it. So we could have done that in the beginning. We're just doing it now. So then we can add our frame, our top frame again. And then I'm just gonna move this piece and constrain it to this inner shaft here. And then that'll snap our beam here to the right angle. So in order to do that, it's just another joint command. We're gonna select this pipe, it doesn't matter where. And then we're gonna move to this, our second component, and select some point along this pipe. It doesn't matter on this one either. And then our motion is gonna be a slider motion, which it should be able to decide in a second. Uh-oh, there we go. So now we can see that pipe's gonna be able to slide back and forth. And then when we click OK, it snaps everything to the right length and has this pipe continue out because we made it way too long. So from here, now this is at whatever angle it's at the angle that will make it work. So now we just need to chop off this end piece. So to do that, I'm going to split this body, split this one, and then I'm gonna select this inner part, so I'm gonna have to hide that component and select this face here. And when I select that, it's gonna cut our piece of conduit for us to that length. And I hit it. So now it's two pieces, but it's the same component. So we're gonna have to open this up and then find which body it is and then hide that body. So now we have one piece of conduit that goes across at the right angle and at the right length, and we didn't have to do any math to find any of that out. You have to be a little more in touch with what you're doing with CAD, but once you go through one model, you'll figure that out. So I'm going to change the name of this component to crossmember. And then what I want to do is we have this T connector, our top T connector, and our bottom T connector, and then crossmember. So I'm going to turn all of that into a single component by making a new component, empty, and crossmember. And then I'm just going to copy all of, or select all of these by shift clicking and then drag that into crossmember. That's the activated one. So I'm gonna pull back into here. I'm gonna go into crossmember and hide all of our joints so that we don't have anything to do with those. And then from here, I just want to check everything again. So I'm gonna try and pull on this leg. So I want to pull on this leg, so I'm gonna click M, select this leg, change it to components, select this leg, and see what happens. And since everything is fixed, that leg can't move relative to the tabletop, which is exactly what we want. If we want to be able to move everything, we can unground this tabletop since it's kind of already at the angle and we don't need to have it grounded anymore. Then we can click on this leg, move, and then everything will move with us all at the right angles. And then I'll cancel that. All right, guys, so the last thing that we want to do is just copy and rotate this crossmember bit, and then we'll be done. So I'm gonna click here, Control C, Control V, and then just rotate it around this way by 180 degrees. Check in on it to make sure that it looks about right, click OK. And now that crossmember is the other way and everything lines up. So there's nothing else really to do on this table. If you want to add all of your hooks and braces and stuff like that to hold the tabletop down, you can do that now, but we'll cover that in another tutorial. If we want, we can come in here and just check on perspective and make sure everything looks about right. Make sure that there's no collisions or anything. If you want to check collisions, you can do inspect and interference. And if you were worried about these two members crossing and hitting each other, you can just select both of them, compute, and it won't detect anything. What we can also do is compute or select this piece and this piece and look for any interference, or we can check for two faces touching. But there's nothing of that in this model. Oh, we can actually check here. So we can check this piece and this piece, and then check on where two faces intersect. And we know that these two faces should touch because that's what we constrain them to be. So that's just a good check at the end of something to make sure that there's nothing. You can check for interference across everything if you'd like, and nothing comes up, which means you can make your model and everything should work out. So from here, now we want to just check on the length of these cross members. We don't have to really care about the angle, but we do want to be able to check the length. So this is similar to the last video. I'm just going to show you on these cross members. So I'm just going to hide the top and bottom T, and it will hide it on that one. And then I'm just going to click inspect, and then this face, and then move around to this face here. And then that shows us the exact length of this pipe, so you don't have to just measure, like pull it and check on what the length is. It's automatic. You just cut two pieces this length, and you'll be able to make your table. That's all we have for today. If you want to see more Fusion tutorials, let us know by liking and subscribing, and also let us know in the comments if there's anything specific that you'd like to see. That's all we have for today. Thanks for watching.